Let's see. Can you hear me now? Let's see if there's any sound coming through. I don't think that the sound was working so far, but I do hope that you guys can hear me all right and the sound may be working. Let's see. Does anybody hear me? Okay, now the sound is much better. All right, so thank you. Okay, it was low before, very low. Okay, now sound works. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some great aspects of the play by Grandmaster Seirawan's lectures. So now let's begin with a beautiful example, really, really good one that I have prepared for you guys today. So just give me 1 second. Gonna load it up. So, okay, here we're gonna see a game that Seirawan played versus Anatoly Karpov. Now, as you probably know, Karpov is one of the greatest players, and destroying him in 30 moves, is something amazing. So Seirawan was actually playing with white. Karpov was playing black. It was played in 1982, and this game presents such a valuable learning experience. White played knight f3, started out like that, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, and d5. So basically here white played d4. Now the opening is nothing that much interesting because we're going through the queen's gambit. Now for those of you who don't know, queen's gambit is when white has a c4 pawn up there. It's called a gambit because black can take it, but then essentially white is going to return it at any point. So black would rather prefer to keep his stronghold, the pawn on d5, out there for the most part. So it makes sense to have, like a structure of this kind really there, for a little longer. Now, ultimately, after the move bishop to g5, Karpov chose to play something different, and he picked up to do h6, bishop h4, castles, and b6. Now, this is the so-called Tartakower variation. It's not very commonly used by grandmasters nowadays because people believe it leads to a common draw. But I do love it for black. It can bring black to a certain challenge in the center, as well as an easier development. The only problem is that white could quite nicely make pressure. And now after c takes to the d, black played knight takes d5. Now, I do like to admit this is still theory, so nothing really of strategic value is happening right now. But my question to you guys is going to come just in a moment. So take a look. Knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop takes d7, and queen takes d7. So far, so good. My question is this. What to do right now with white? Focus on this position and let's try to figure out Grandmaster Seirawan's move together. Now, one of you just asked, okay, where's Yasser? Well, he's not with me today for sure, but that's what I mean. This lecture is to honor his skills as a chess player and a teacher and to bring up some valuable points that I was able to learn myself from his lectures. So I do hope that you'll find them just as useful. If you want to have some actual learning experience, with Grandmaster Seirawan's courses, check out the link below this video. It offers 60% off like a 7 hours course of his early courses where he was bringing, a lot of value live. Now his current courses are even better, but this is what, it has an archive value, and I just love it. I mean, this is the Pro Chess courses. The first time when I saw it, I was like, this is something I got to get. I was like, I think it was 10 or 11 years old. It's brilliant. It's really good. So check it out. I've also posted a link on the chat. You can look at it below the video and get an amazing discount for the next few hours. Now, you said g3, and you are right. If the bishop goes to g2, it's going to have a lot more value and tension against the center, as opposed to us playing any kind of move of the resource of e3. The bishop on g2 just really needs to be there. We don't care so much if that move is the very best or if it's not. We just want to have what it takes in order to make this game good. And what it takes to make this game good is clearly white's action to just move and push his pieces forward. It's a really good idea. G3 plus bishop G2, put some extra tension in the center and hold black a little more backward. All right, this is a good idea. So what's going on next? After G3, black played rook to E8. And now that's going to make a little bit of a challenge to white's castling. If white plays bishop G2, black's going to do bishop A6. Should we move the pawn, the king is going to stand in the middle. And I have to admit that with those three pieces on the line, it will make it a little harder. So I feel like white is in a little bit of danger right now. Not so much of a danger, but, well, let's face it. Nobody's going to like being attacked and harassed by the opponents in such a way. So what should be white's best way to go? Let's think a little for a moment here and try to figure out the more efficient way to deal with black's counterplay. See, so this is a good question. Anybody? Queen C2. I think it's fine, but I don't really believe this is going to work. Even Queen B3 wouldn't be that great. Queen C2 will be nice, but then keep in mind, if black is given the possibility to play a move of bishop to A6, this is everything for him. So, number one, what we would like to do is first and foremost, neutralize. And this is a very valuable point that I like to bring up every time when I see a similar position. And what it basically means is one thing. If you notice that the opponent has active or aggressive pieces putting close, keeping the challenge, you have to fight them. Now, this is important because whatever defenses you attempt to follow, likely they wouldn't matter unless you actually figure a way to deal with his pieces, the big pieces, it's the important ones. So, first and foremost, white needed to make the move of rook c3. It was a great move, actually. Rook c2 is nice, but rook c3 is even better because then we have the opportunity of getting that rook against the black queen and rook, and then having the ability to just shoot and attack against him big time. It was great. Remember, if your opponent is put in a stronger or more advanced position, this is something important that you just don't want to let him have. So white knew that kind of thing, and he realized it's better if we take early measures so that we don't give him the chance to get whatever it is that he wants. So it was a nice, smart move. Remember, if you're ever under pressure, you can do different things, but you have to understand, never allow him to hold you in such a position, just to keep you under pressure. You have to exchange the pieces, fight that problem, and you'll be good. So it was a good start. It really was. So what happens? What's going on next? After rook c3, in the position, Karpov decided to play knight to a6. Now, in that case, of course, if we do rook e3, black will play queen b4, and there is no immediate danger. So white decided, okay, we needed to play rook c3 because it was more or less necessary. But the most important thing in the opening is to develop. So we can do rook e3 on the next move, or on any of the next moves when we have to. For now, however, given that black had no direct threat, this provides us a great chance to complete our development, and in fact, rook e3 is now more or less of a threat. So that was interesting. And in fact, it was quite exciting that up here, Karpov made more or less of a blunder, or at least it looks like he did. It was quite exciting. Black played c5, sacrificing a piece to prove that white's position of the king behind is not going to work. I mean, like, he should have just played something like bishop b7. I would say that the position would have stood equal after rook e3, like, or maybe even pawn e3, most likely. I'd say that likely white has to do e3 and prepare for bishop g2 short castles, but would have been fine. c5 was this very hard attempt to open up, and let's have a look. maybe he's going to succeed. Maybe that's going to prove white wrong. So rook e3, apparently that's the great the great move white was really hoping for all that time. So it does happen. And then black plays bishop to e6. Bishop e6, queen takes a6, c takes d4. Okay, this is going to be a fairly instructive example to talk about because so many players I know often get in a position like that. What I mean is that they often get in a position where the opponent has strong pressure and they don't know how to deal with that. So it is thereby a challenging position. So what to do now? I'd like to hear you guys having some suggestions on to what should be White's best approach here. What do we do so there is so we can find a way to get out? How to do that successfully? Anybody who can give me a recommendation as to where White has to go? Yeah. Excuse me. Well, why didn't you play queen to the d7, you're wondering? Because if you played queen d7, black would have just lost the rook. You see, white has two attackers. Was it a blunder? In a way, it was a blunder. But I don't know. Perhaps Karpov just wanted to sacrifice at this point. I can't say his reasoning, but it wasn't right. C takes to the d4, knight takes d. No. If you do go for the knight takes d4, black's move is going to be queen b4. He will check. He will take down the knight. It's a disaster. You know, the last thing you want is really to go that way. It's just, no, it's not going to work. We're not going for it. Not in this moment, at least. So we need something else. What else can we try in the given position? Anyone? Well, rook b3. Very good suggestion. That's all that white needed. Let's cover the b4 so black doesn't get up there with the queen. And upon that, especially when black plays bishop f5, we can do bishop g2. Things look clear. Everything's steady. We're ready to castle right now, and the position is good. How good? Well, I guess that depends, but it really doesn't look like black has many threats. I mean, if you've been following the World Championship match, one of the reasons why like Carlsen wasn't able to win so many good positions is because despite his great activity in many of them, he didn't really have that many threats. And I would say the threats are the actual fuel of the attack. If there's no threats, there's no attack. And if there's no attack, well, you know what that means. So essentially, we understand the main trouble. In this particular case, in a particular moment, black just does not seem to have the possibility to attack or threaten, like big time now. So let's see what really happens in this moment. As white's playing with bishop to the g2, he's ready, he has everything, and black is missing the actual tactics. So let's see. Bishop to g2, bishop takes bishop c2. You know, you're going to have to deal with the initiative in such a position. You're going to have to stay back and feel the pressure. Truth be told, black's got quite a bit of that pressure right now. So how to advance? What to do in this position right now? It's a good question. Really is. Let's see if anybody could provide me the best suggestion for defense that white can arrange at this point. I think that running away with the rook is the most logical move. Apparently, a move of rook a3 will be in everybody's mind. Why not? Just it's a good square. But then there is queen b4, and suddenly we realize that the fact that black's pawn a piece down doesn't matter. He's in fact playing with 3 pieces while we're defending with more or less 1 or 2. It's really not that nice. Not to mention that there could be even moves like d3, so that after e takes to the d3, we're going to find ourselves in an awful position. You probably see why. If you're not seeing why, I want to tell you. After d3, e takes to the d3, queen takes to the b2, and similar moves. No, that's gonna hurt. I don't like that. Queen takes b2 or whatever. Now you see, black creates a threat, and he's ready to set up some traps. What to do? Of course, sacrifice back. That has to do with the same idea that the move of rook c3 did. If we're going to ever achieve a successful defense, we have to neutralize. That basically suggests we need to get rid of the opponent's important pieces that are causing trouble. In this particular case, the piece which was causing most trouble in the position apparently happened to be the bishop. If the bishop is gone, there is going to be one less piece down there making more trouble, making less trouble actually, and it's a good start. Maybe not perfect, but it's definitely a good start. So, what's going on now? After knight takes d4, black played bishop takes b3, knight takes b3, and rook a8. Okay, now perhaps black felt here that his attack is not going too well. And yet again, if we just castle, black will likely take on e2, or he's preparing to do rook c2 in some way. He'll get the two rooks over there, especially if we exchange the queens once e2 falls. So he's going to get some compensation, I believe, for the material. Two minor pieces for a rook are supposed to be an advantage, but not always. If he's getting a few pawns, this is going to matter. So what to do now? Now, one of you asked, you could have done rook e3, right? Couldn't he? No, we didn't have the time. We had to take d4, and now let that happen. So what to do next? Is e3 a good idea? Not bad. I have to agree, it's not a bad idea. But then let's think about black's chances. He will likely do d4. Can't take it because we're pinned. And if we take with the knight, there's rook c1 check, or maybe even queen b4. Now it's really going to give him more opportunities. Let's think about a move that will help us solidify the position. Definitely. Thank you. This is a great move. It's a very important move, very strong move that just adds the defense the way we need it. And it was fantastic. Strong, consistent, good defensive, and solid. More importantly, solid. Rook f3 protects the e2 while we're providing our opportunity to castle on the king's side. So white just castled short, and as black played rook takes to b2, now we have rook d1. Sure, black got one pawn, but we don't care. Who cares about the pawn? The best idea is to get all the important pieces into the play, and we certainly have it all. So the pieces are good, the control is excellent, and the rest is just as cool. Wow. All right. Well, after that move, things do look great, and as it stands. And okay, then yeah, surely it's pretty powerful. So, how to convert that advantage into a win? Let's see if anybody can tell me what's White's most effective way to convert that into a win. Now, while you're doing that, one of you just asked, why not queen d3 instead of bishop f3? Thank you for asking that question. That's a good question. The reason why didn't move his queen back there is because if he did, black would have played queen f6. And most likely, you have to understand that the heavy pieces, like major pieces in terms of queen, rooks, they're never really that great of defenders. You want to use your weak pieces or lesser strong pieces like the bishop, because the less strong piece is always something, less strong. You don't want to tie down a queen into the defense, do you? All right. Now, what would have happened if black played queen b4 check? It's possible, although I'd like to say white has queen d2 in that case. So we would definitely prefer to go with queen b4, queen f6. It's more long term. Anyway, white chose the easy way. The simpler, the better. That's the way I call it. Anyway, what to do now? So, it's an important question of good control. So what to do now? Take a moment to think about this position. It's very, very important. White stands well. He's got good play. Things look good. Where to go now? Knight d4? Absolutely. Thank you. This is a great suggestion. When you get a material advantage, you have to know and expect that for a while you will be on the back side. Taking the d5, as I just got as a suggestion, would have helped black to trade and maybe take down e2. It's not that good. It's not that clear. Now, what we want to do is avoid complications. Being in a winning position means that every chance for black or for the opponent to complicate is going to be a good resource. You don't want to give him that resource. Even if it doesn't work, still, you can think about making it work. So now, by becoming more active, instead of letting black to get his own tactics and resources, white intended to make black defend. Black had to stay back there due to the queen c8 check, which would have been very scary once the knight has taken away d8. And so after queen e8, Seirawan just took that pawn. It's great. You can think about black playing queen a8 now and wonder, all right, isn't white gonna lose this knight? And yet you realize that taking the knight is actually going to lose for black, because we're going to utilize that insignificant rook to go for rook c8, check here, check with the queen on d3. Black has only one way to defend, and then after queen d4, we realize the inevitability of the rook being attacked, the checkmate happening, and more interestingly, the queen and the rook completely dominating black's position in many different ways. So black was definitely going to lose. g5, queen f5, and that rook falls. It's amazing to see how, in fact, being active is the way to very naturally take away the opponent's ability to counterplay. Just stay active. Don't let your opponent dominate you. Let him resolve problems. When he has to solve problems, he has no time to challenge or attack you in any way. So knight e6, knight takes a7, black tried rook c7, becoming a little more active. And let's see if anybody has the right plan on how to further strengthen white's position. The queen and the knight are perfect. The bishop and the rook too look very good. I do like everything that white's gotten so far. So what to do next? So actually, what I have to tell you is first and foremost, expand. Make sure that you give your pieces and your possibilities more space. Knight b5 was a nice move, but be careful. He's going to take it. So white played just pawn a4. He could have done rook takes d5 and leave the back rank hanging and let the black's rook come in. Why? Why give him all that? It's not about whether it will work or not. It's about making sure he never gets to even utilize that point. A small, gradual way of bringing it. In fact, Karpov got beat by the same way he's used to beat other people. So it was really interesting. a4, queen e8, and rook takes d5. And I have to say, I think that these were Karpov's prime years, by the way. He became a world champion in just a few years before, I think it was 7 years before. It was played before, I think, before the matches with Kasparov, if I'm not mistaken. And it was in his prime years. And of course, he didn't play too well here. He made an incorrect sacrifice. But Seirawan's way of taking advantage of that and really destroying the world champion was just so beautiful. Now, letting the knight go simply felt quite awesome, as now you realize black's g6 fails due to the very same idea we had earlier, that is queen d4, and then after the move of rook b1 check, king g2, pawn f6, and queen takes f6. He goes back there. We've already been through that. And queen f8. So there's no chance to defend the h8 checkmate and the e4 idea. It's so good. I mean, I want you to just pay attention to the way on how white's pieces are coordinated as opposed to black. Just look at how effective each and every one of the white pieces is playing. They're supporting each other. They're helping one another. What about black? Well, they're not. In fact, that's sort of what happened in the game. And then after the check, Karpov picked up to play f5. But then after queen takes f5, g6, and queen e6, it was game over. He doesn't have a way to defend queen e8 next move, and queen g8 wherever he plays, so he resigned. And even though this looks like quite of an easy and convenient game due to Karpov's mistake, it shows how a lot of these strategies of converting an advantage, restricting the opponent, starting with a move like rook c3, fight the opponent's good pieces, and yet not delaying our development, can help you out a lot. Remember that one of the secrets of successful defense is just to take out his threats. If you can find a way to take out the opponent's threats, even at the cost of sacrificing a little bit of your advantage, will give you a long-term pressure. And so black's sacrifice definitely turned out bad. More efficiently, the blockade and the fact that white took over the initiative before black can develop any further was quite efficient and I would say quite great. So I hope you like this game as much as I did. Now, again, I'd like to point out that if anybody wants me to send to you this game, like with all the graphic commentary and my annotations, please do send me an email to valeri.lilov@gmail.com, or you can directly visit my website with a request that I send you the the part of this game, the PGN of these games. Actually, I'd love to do that and give you some more insight on Seirawan's approach to mastering the game. In the meantime, do not forget to check for just the next few hours. This offer is only available for the next few hours. Below the video or on the chat right now, I'm going to post a link to his early fantastic pro chess courses that have been appreciated by many, including me when I was younger. It's a great course, and it's coming with a 60% discount. Now, one of you just asked a question relative to related to the opponent's pieces. Is there any specific rules for developing your on? Well, yeah, bring them up. You know, knight d4, knight c6. You see what white did with these advanced and strong pieces he built up. How to set more coordination? Well, that's what white did. He moved the knight, he moved the rook, he moved the bishop, and that's about it. How do I know when the next live stream will be held? The next live stream, as well as every live stream, unless some major change happens, is usually on Saturdays at usually the same time. So now let's take a look at another game. I'm going to bring up another one for you guys. Just give me 1 second so I can set it up. Okay. So the next game was played between Seirawan and Kasparov. Did you think Seirawan only beat Karpov? No. He actually did some pretty cool things to Kasparov too. So let's have a look. That game was played in Kasparov's prime, 1986. I believe this is one of the, I think the next year after Kasparov became a world champion by defeating Karpov. So let's see how did Seirawan took on the strongest player in the world for the next 20 years. Actually, that was a pretty cool game. So Seirawan was playing with white. He started with d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, d5. Then he played knight f3, and after bishop g7, bishop g5. It's interesting to see the approach of not getting into the complex lines of c6 to the d and everything. Just going a bit slower is always preferable in these positions. Like anything that can force or will eventually get to force us to complicate the game may not be as productive. So white just develops his bishop on the g5, putting a little bit of challenge. And of course, black can do knight e4, knight e4, c6 d, takes, and e6. This is a combination that is quite highly regarded in theory. Black gives away a pawn, but he's able to take it back pretty easily. So he can use or try to use the bishop pair when he makes a move of c5 later. So here comes the first question to you guys. What should white do right now? Okay, so we see two good bishops. Eventually his ability to castle and prepare its c5. So what should be white's best approach to coordinate right now? Now, I guess you're thinking, and queen b3 is not such a bad idea. I like that. But then black would just do c6, I think, and castle. Maybe you can even do knight bd7. So you see, there's something important you need to remember about openings. When you're playing the opening, you don't want just the generic, straightforward type of opening formation that's out there for every opening. What you care about, and what white, I believe, cared about mostly, was making a move that was going to guarantee him more space, control, and above all else, the ability to get a better pawn structure. You see, getting a better pawn structure isn't that easy, but it is necessary if you want to become more successful. White's last move was pawn up to b4, and it was a great move seeing how that works. What's this all about? Well, after the move of pawn to b4, white has now taken on the ability to play against c5, and so that's how we are building up on the better pawn structure. Strong move, cutting off some of the good space, and felt right. So, what happened next? After that move 9? Isn't it too early? I know what you're thinking. Isn't it too early to do this? No. See, as long as the pawn move you're going to make is not going to risk your position in any way, you have to take on the opportunity to get the better pawn structure, because the pawn structure is going to matter in the long run, much more than even the development. Now, some people use that concept quite literally, and they don't care no more about development, but just about getting a better pawn structure. So in the end, they lose because the pawn structure outweighs their development, and thereby they just can't use the pawn structure to fight the opponent's stronger pieces. So how do we know the balance? It's simple. When you've got one or two moves to set a better pawn structure, that's okay. As long as you can't counter, you choose them. But don't do too many. See? White had the idea of playing b4 and a3 because they were going to guarantee him quite some space and blockade versus c5. But then, as soon as these moves were played, he continued with this simpler, yet more profound development. So now, he's going to have a really nice pawn structure. And I've been often asked by different chess players, Valeri, tell me the most important thing I need to know about the opening. And I always like to say, if you care of the most important thing in the opening, focus on pawn structure, because the pawn structure guarantees everything. And so that is what we need to do. This is essential. After continuing with knight b to d7, white played another very important move. So what should white do next? What's the best way to go? Let's see if anybody has a good idea on white's plan. Strong position, apparently. A lot of value with most of the pieces, and especially the pawns that we've put in. So what should be the best way to go now? Okay, now e3 and e3 and bishop d3. I guess white didn't want to exchange that bishop because you see, the bishop on f5 doesn't do anything. It's as good, but it doesn't make much. Queen b3 to start a minority attack would have been a good move. And yet, Seirawan decided to start with a very special move, knight a4. I wouldn't say that it's much better than queen b3, but it's a very special idea of seeing how the knight, and then the queen follows from behind, are really so strong as they go along in this position. Now, black saw the danger. He saw the danger of playing b5 and everything, and he decided to close the position in the middle as quickly as he can. And it made sense. It was a good idea. I mean, in my opinion, more or less had to do it, just like that. So he did. Okay. Now, what comes next? Knight b6. Actually, first a4 happened. So white doesn't. I mean, black wanted to close the position, so white doesn't attack there. And then there was knight b6. So here comes a really interesting point about building up a plan. Now, apparently, whatever we tried on the queen side did not work as successfully. It's not to say that it was a complete failure, but it just didn't seem to bring so much value to our play. So now black is getting ready. He'd love to play a move of knight c4, and he'd love himself a good, strong challenge on that position. So how to play right now? What to do now? What to do next? Take a second to think about this, because it's such a relevant question, actually, such an important thing. Knight h4 or knight d2. I like those moves, but let's talk about the plan behind them. It's easy to make a move, but it's more difficult to back it up with a concrete plan. See, what is the right plan to follow? See, the most valuable question is how to organize our pieces on a proper side of the board where we can advance, expand, and gain more space. Given that the king side is pretty symmetrical and the queen side is being actually quite closed, what we need to do is to focus in the center. Okay, great. It's a very good idea to, play alongside the center and maybe, advance in there. But I'd say what is even better is to plan an outline. Let's just figure out now the pieces that white should put in so you can advance. One is to play with knight d2. Then there could be a move of rook e1. And then there could be the move of rook a to the d1. Then we could focus on playing a move of pawn up to the f3 in this position. And so that is a very, very important thing to do. First and foremost, set up a good outline of moves and then order them. We've already outlined the moves and the list is clear, but how to begin them? Seirawan found out that knight d2 will be the best beginning because we are bringing the knight on a position that's very flexible. We don't commit ourselves to anything that can put us at risk. And then little by little, after rook e1, rook e7, and bishop f3, white is starting to prepare himself quite well towards the middle. Rook e8, g3, bishop h3, and now white has to prepare a possible break. It's not that easy, but what to do now? Anyone? Now, how to play here? Let's take a look. We don't have e4 going for us because if we do this, black will exchange and likely d4 is going to fall. So I don't mind it, but it doesn't look like we could get a whole lot with this, so it's unfortunate. What to do? Does anybody have a suggestion? I really like this position. I think it's pretty and it looks good, but then we have to plan up. e4, no, you can't do that. e4, as I mentioned, is going to leave quite a bit of a weakness on d4. So why don't we just play a small move, like, for example, this one. What white plays with bishop g2 is that he exchanges one of black's most valuable pieces, but more so, he can take out the danger. Now let's talk about danger in chess. A lot of chess players don't understand that concept. Danger in chess happens when you find out the opponent is having some strong or scary pieces or threats. Oftentimes it all begins with just one or two pieces standing closer to your king. You say, all right, I don't think he can attack me with them, so you just dismiss that. And yet he starts with the threats. Then you think about defending, and you realize you can't defend all that well. Then comes another one and another one. And you feel like you probably missed some of those threats. But the reality is, you didn't really miss the threats. You missed the pieces that you had to deal so you could avoid these threats in the first place. It's like what White did in this position is to apply that same approach he did versus Karpov. The very moment that Karpov had this rook and a queen on the e file, White dealt with them. He didn't wait until the threats began. He dealt with those pieces right off the bat. Same thing here. The bishop stood in close. White took the chance to exchange it. He even got a chance to play h4, which prevents g5 or anything of that kind. So that's quite interesting. Knight c4. And now I have a good question for you guys. What do you think White must do at this point? Would you suggest that he should rather exchange? Or would you say that it's better to keep on the knights in here and avoid the exchange? What do you think? Exchange or not to exchange? That is the question. Now, while you're thinking, I want to suggest you to really learn typical patterns in chess. Like, typical patterns usually means finding like a lot about the different rules of, okay, should I be thinking about traits, how to evaluate the position, what to do about this or that. And it's not that easy to, of course, do this, but I think if you learn the typical patterns rather than studying a lot of opening variations or a lot of games that you wouldn't remember, this is going to help you a lot more. Now, this is why I recommend so much checking Grandmaster Seirawan scores, which you can find below the video for 60% off. It's got some of the most valuable positional lectures you can see. More so, check out the ones that he has on decision making. The thing is, we can take the c4 knight, but then that would only result in black opening up another line for his queen and getting a pass pawn. And if you actually think about the prospects of the piece, while White's knight can very effectively join the king's side, the black knight, even though it's strong, does not necessarily have anything that dangerous. So Seirawan chose correctly. He wanted to think about the possibility of, first and foremost, like building up his play, and then anything else. Now we have the plan, we have the possibilities. Let's go forward. So knight f3. Now apparently after that move, black had to do bishop f6, but this was the time where White chose to play rook e2. And in case of rook g7, rook h1. It's interesting because it almost looks like black has a more active position, and yet he isn't quite capable to deliver that many threats with it. It's just a good position, and that's pretty much all. Very good for White. Very well played. So what happens next after that last move? Well, after rook h1, White just kept on building. Rook e1. h6 prepares g5 and queen d3. You see how White makes it in a very subtle way, letting black to make some weaknesses and mistakes, while at the same time every move is somewhat purposeful. I call that gradual chess. Now, after black played rook f8, White has already improved all his pieces, and he made something you would consider crazy. He did knight d2. Why the hell would he do that? I mean, we just escaped the exchange like 5 moves ago. Within those 5 moves, White really regrouped his pieces and stabilized. So now if he's going to look for an advantage, he needs the queen. So exchanging at the right time not only would give us a great control, so we don't give black a chance to exploit any diagonals, but essentially that pass pawn will never turn into an advantage. It's not about exchanging or not. It's about when to do it. So remember this other aspect of trading. You'd always like to consider exchanging, but when to do it is, if not to say even more important than just the idea of trading. Now exchange on c4 comes. White regroups his queen. He brings it towards the f3. And after a few of the next moves, once the queen came over to f3, the position looks more or less equal. Okay, Kasparov played queen d5. So how would Seirawan win this game? This is the most exciting part. Exchange, takes. How do we win here? Do we really get to win this position? How to do that? I'm going to teach you a practical lesson here. That's why I chose this game. Like, basically, White cannot win in any easy way. But one of the more effective ways how you can win on an intermediate level is let the opponent push it first. This is why I love positional play, and I like to teach my students that it's not about them outplaying the opponent. That's hard, and it requires a lot of knowledge and experience. But make the useful moves that will constantly follow a plan or improve your position even if you don't have one, and let him figure out how to worsen his position, because a lot of people, they don't know what to do, and they start basically making moves that aren't helping. So why just started waiting, sort of making moves that wasn't even that much useful, I have to admit to you. But in some way, they kind of started teasing Black, so he's being teased. He doesn't see a way to win. He doesn't see anything direct. So you can see it happens even with the best players. So King E7, King D6, Rook H2, King C6, Rook H1. That's really funny now. It almost looks like Carlsen Karyakin game. Rook D2, Bishop D6. Okay, we wait, and Black's nerves didn't hold, and he decided, okay, the hell with this knight, I'm going to take it, and I'm going to play a move of Rook E4. I'm going to activate and put some pressure on. Now, that's what happens with a lot of chess players. They just don't want to be in such a position, and they want to do something aggressive. As that happened, however, Black gave away an important square of D4, as well as D5 is weak. And he kept on going, pushing the position even more. It's interesting to see how a player from Kasparov's caliber could not, even hold the tension, and he thought everything is okay. He exchanged. He tried to bring the rook. It's still not that bad for Black. He still has the possibilities. But then he kind of rushed it a little bit. Rook H3 and G4. Now, there's one thing, I call it chess justice. Now, this is probably going to be a topic for another lecture, but when I was younger, my dad used to explain it to me like that. You can only get a bad position if you've made something terribly wrong. If you are getting in a challenging position and yet you can't recall a point where you did something terribly wrong, then there's a good chance you have a solid solution on how you can resolve the problem. Truth is, White didn't do anything wrong to deserve all this tactics by Black. And thereby, all the tactics, they just weren't that right. You see, Black went on to tactically try to win, but in reality, he forgot that the pass pawn of White is faster. His pieces seem much better coordinated. And instead of agreeing for the draw, and probably you have to do Rook A3 check here, he pushed the pawn, which led to White just stopping that pawn with the rook and advancing his own much faster. One goes faster than two, D3, King E3, and after that, Black saw that his two pawns are likely going to fall, and he can't stop the G. And when if Black plays with something of the kind like C2, let's say, there's just Rook C1, so D2 is blocked. If Black plays D2 instead, Black's just going to play Rook, pawn to G7, and as a result of C2, White can even take here. Takes, check, and King E2, and we realize there is no possibility for Black to promote. But this is how you can win a lot of games. In fact, let your opponent to make the mistake first. After the move G6, D3, King to E3, Black was out of desperation. He took on F2, but then White played G7 and he won the game. It was a dead draw game, but then it lost for Black exactly for this reason. It's interesting to see Seirawan taking this very gradual approach of building up and setting everything in motion. So at a certain point, when the opponent attacks, knowing he was a more experienced and stronger player, when he attacks, he's not going to be able to win. So Black pushed the position a bit too much. And when everything was in place, Black just didn't have a chance to make it any stronger. Pretty much of an interesting finale, very practical one, and something you could use in your own games too. All right, now what I like to show you is another one, that was fairly exciting. Now this was again, if you want me to send you any of the games that I was showing, and as well as the comments, feel free to just send me a message through my website. I'd love to do that. Okay, so let's have a look right now at another exciting game. So give me 1 second. All right, this is it. Now this is like kind of a short game that was played between Yasser Seirawan and Vassily Ivanchuk. Now you probably heard that Ivanchuk is one of the most experienced players, but he has ups and downs in a way. And some games he plays brilliantly, others not so much. Now this game was not one of his best games, but Seirawan's way to punish the opponent's mistake is super instructive. Have a look. It was the King's Indian, Knight c3, Bishop g7, e3 d6, and then e4 d6, Bishop d3, e5 d5. I love controlling a lot of space in the center, although here we're still in the theory. So both white and black are developing. White sets up f4 in order to control g4. He's ready to develop his bishop and the queen in a good way. So black decided to just play knight d7. And as white completed his development, black countered white's bishop by just playing bishop h6. Very smart. Queen d2, exchange, retakes. I've always noticed that the player who gets a more advanced pawn structure in this easy, comfortable development is always going to be more successful. White did it greatly. But I have a question for you guys. How would you respond when black played c6 here? What should white do now? Let's take a look. We have a good game, strong center, and good pressure. What's white's best way to go? Now, when if you said it wasn't bishop h6 hanging, it was, but if we took it, black had that little check. It's important to mention, actually, so thank you for asking. If he would have taken it back, and I guess that would have only helped him to develop his queen with a tempo. So white didn't want that. He preferred to have his own queen develop with a tempo. Where to go now? What to do next? It's a really good question. h3. Well, I'm not a really great fan of the move of h3. I mean, let's face it. If we play h3, that will likely lead to nothing. I mean, it's not a bad move, but come on, what is it doing? We don't need that type of move. What white wanted much more was an aggressive move. Remember, if you have an advantage, especially at the opening stage, you need to use it quite quickly. Now, there are different things we can try, but rule number one, put pressure versus your opponent. That's how you can make him defend even more. Queen h6 was an excellent move. It felt right, well put, and then with that queen over there, we can have moves like the queen g7 and a few others just like that. So it was nice. All right, what happens now? I mean, queen h6, black plays knight dc5. Of course, a good protection like this seems to help, but he doesn't have to worry. At least that queen isn't able to create that much threat, that many trouble in the position. So black feels safe, at least for now. What to do next? Castling. Not a bad idea, but it doesn't work in this case. If we do castle, black would discover a check against our king and win the bishop at the same time. So I wouldn't really think about castling at this particular moment. It's interesting, but not good enough, for sure. So we need a different type of move. What else would you like to do? Take your time. Don't rush. Just think about a good move that white should make right now. Knight c1, b3. So many good suggestions. But in reality, all these moves are rather passive. I don't mind passive moves, but what we would like to do is to think and find a move that is gonna just help us to develop. We can think about a move of bishop to the b1. So like after continuing with the move of bishop to the b, like bishop to b1, we get an opportunity to open up our rook. We can have the setup. We can have the challenge. And now we realize that d takes to the c is a pretty significant shot. We've got the d pawn to put pressure against, and just after continuing with rook to bishop to b1, black played king e7. I feel like he just really pushed it a little bit too much with that last move. So, first and foremost, you have to exploit your opponent, obviously, breaking the principles. That's what needs to happen. But how to do it is a good question. What do you do when you're ahead in development, have a stronger position, and yet you don't know how to take advantage? What to do in that particular case? How should white play now? Now, one of you discussed, okay, what if black just takes the pawn on b2? Wouldn't that have worked a little bit better? I think it could have, but I don't think that he wanted to do it for the simple reason that if black takes the pawn on b2, white's got queen g7, and then he's got the move of d takes to the c, which just really kills off most of the black, like possibilities. There's rook takes to the d6, there's a hit on the c6, and everything. I just don't feel like he really wanted to experience this. So that's why he played king e7, hoping that maybe he can protect the pawn on the d6 a little bit safer and stand well. Now, what do you do if you are ahead in development and you have a stronger preparation than your opponent? D takes to the c? I think it's an idea. But then, you're right. Open up the position. You're going to always open up in this position. So, but first and foremost, you want to exchange. Let's do this. f4 was terrific. After the move of f4, when black captured, white found that the move of rook f1 helps him to really strengthen the position up a little bit more. He moved queen takes f4 to keep the tension on. We've got queen f6 as well as d takes to the c6 ready. And okay, so that's fine. As an idea in this type of position, and we have the threats. We got the challenge, and now black has to defend with f6. D takes to the c6, queen takes to the c6, and knight d5. When the position opens, there is always this inevitable collision between yours and the opponent's pieces. And when that happens, the player who has more preparation and he's put in his pieces will always be most successful. What was so great about it is that after knight to, in fact, white even did it slightly differently. After d takes to c, queen takes to the c, first, there was knight d4 in order to force the black queen to go to a more backward position, and then knight d5, which killed him. Ultimately, wherever the black king goes, we're going to likely take, like knight takes f6, and if he plays king d8, we got queen takes d6, bishop d7, and knight b5. And you just get to look. Queen, the two knights, the rook, and the extra tension against the black pieces were just absolutely fantastic. We have a great way to keep the challenge, and black was just losing it up. What I love about this example is to see how, again, the gradual approach that white took on in order to improve his pieces and to strengthen his development really helped him big time. I do encourage you to take a look at Grandmaster Seirawan's brilliant course, that's being offered for 60% just tonight, in order to learn a lot more about his approach. And if you have any questions or so, you can always let me know. Check up the link below the video or visit my website, which is tigerlilov.com. Thank you all for tonight, and I'll speak to you next weekend at the same time.